Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and welcome to High Road to Humanity. And as usual, we have a really interesting show for you today. I'm here today with Robert Sharpe. But before I bring Robert on, I want to give you a little information about him. He's a really interesting guy. He's written a few books, and he does what I do. He interviews really cool spiritual people. So I can't wait to talk to him because I have lots of questions for him today. But sit back and relax, you guys, and let me give you a little bit of information about Robert Sharpe. So here we go. Robert is the founder of BiteRadio.me, host and producer of the Bringing Inspiration to Earth radio show, and author of Joy Potential, Where You'd Least Expect It. And it's no secret, Spirituality Bites, BiteRadio.me, was established in 2010 to provide a source of positive programming designed to enlighten and entertain listeners. In the more than 7 years of programming, the Bringing Inspiration to Earth show has aired 1,200 plus shows focusing on inspirational guests in the self-help, spirituality, children's corner, and environmental awareness genre. Now, Robert is a former corporate trainer in the financial and restaurant industry. He has more than 30 years experience in the study of self-help and personal development and metaphysics. He has more than 15 years radio experience, including both broadcasting and internet-based show development. Robert has a bachelor's degree in psychology from Whittier College. And before we get started, he has written 3 books, but the book we're going to talk about today is called It's No Secret. And if you're watching me on YouTube, I'm holding the book up. It's pretty cool. Spirituality Bites. I love this title. This is pretty interesting. And before I bring him on, I just want to read a quick paragraph out of his book. So sit back and relax and check this out. He says, it's all about me and my choices. And he puts a quote in here from Eleanor Roosevelt that I'm going to read you. In the long run, we shape our lives and we shape ourselves. The process never ends until we die. And the choices we make are ultimately our own responsibility. Wow, that's pretty profound. This journey, and he goes on to say in this chapter of his book, he says, this journey we are on is all about our own individual experience. It's not about family, friends, job, kids, parents. It's about our individual experience on this earth and the life we create for ourselves. It's about the choices we make on a daily basis and the path we travel. Hey, Robert, welcome to High Road to Humanity.
Hi, Nancy. Thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Cool. You know, I have to ask you, I know why I started doing this, but why did you start a radio show? What prompted you?
Yeah, well, as you had mentioned in the introduction, I had some background in the broadcast area, and
Right.
I was behind the scenes of a show for a friend of mine in Las Vegas for many years, and
Oh,
I
wow.
was happy being behind the scenes, not
Mm-hmm.
in front of the mic. And then one time discovered internet radio, and I thought, I've always been wanting to do have a network of different shows with different people,
Mm-hmm.
because I really didn't want to have my show, because
Oh, okay.
when I was on the broadcast, and I would have to step in and heard my voice, it's like, oh no, I couldn't do that to people.
Oh, you're so funny.
Well, I mean, it was
It's
so.
hard. Yeah, it's hard to. It's
Yeah,
not as easy as everybody thinks it is what you're telling
yeah,
me. Yeah.
and you always sound different,
Right.
from what you think, because just but anyway, and so one day, the domain company I used for my websites basically came out with the .me domain name, and I thought, and I had been told years ago that my work is really just bringing inspiration to Earth. I mean, it was
Wow.
like in a reading in the '90s, and it was just really profound. But it encapsulated everything I did. I mean, it was
Right.
the perfect frame for everything that I did. So anyway, I decided that well, I'm going to go ahead and try it, and if it works, great. If it doesn't, and
Yeah.
now here I'm actually now 10 years later.
10 years later. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Now you do your show. Is it weekly? Or every day, or
Yes.
how often?
Well, I've actually gone. I've had one day a week,
Okay.
for a while. But basically, 1 year out of the 10, I decided I'm going to see if I can do 5 days a week. Because it was one of those cases where I had a lot of people, referring potential guests to me, and a lot of really
Mm-hmm.
good topics. So
Right.
anyway, I thought I'm going to give myself a challenge. So I did that 1 year.
And that
And
was a lot.
it was, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because I just couldn't give the depth of attention, that I really like to
Yeah.
give.
Well, yeah, I agree with that because I always like, and in my publicist, she always gives me a hard time. She always says, you can't read the whole book, but I do because
Hmm.
I feel like I've written a book and I want people to read my book. So I would want them
Right.
to read, I've got to read theirs. I've got to understand, who they are before I can interview them.
Right.
And that I understand that completely. That makes a whole lot of sense to me. I really like this book because it's short and it's concise and it
Right.
and it talks a lot about things. And there were a couple topics that I just can't wait to ask you questions on. So
Okay.
if we want to talk about the book, here's what I want to say to you because I really feel a camaraderie in some way, and you know more than me because you've been doing it longer than me. This is my second year in doing it, having the show High Road to Humanity. But I will say this: every show I've had, it's interesting. I believe God sends these people to me, and I learn what I need to learn on each show. And every show I do, I become more enlightened and closer to the divine. Do you feel that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. It really helps raise your awareness
Yeah.
in so many different ways. And it's I love it, and the idea that um, not only the people that, come to you, but also the people that, aren't really a good fit for you and how you navigate that.
Hmm.
And I mean, it's a really dynamic situation. I love it, and that's what
Yeah.
kind of led to the book because of all of the things that I had learned up to that point
Right.
from guests.
Well, and you learned a lot of the same things I have. You talk about awareness, which is
Hmm.
something that we all need to start paying attention. My book is called Wake Up, the Universe is Speaking to You. And it's the same as awareness. Pay attention. And people don't seem to pay attention. And that's been one of my things is, hey, you guys start pay attention to what the universe is
Right.
showing you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Um,
Yeah,
now,
and you can choose to pay attention or not,
exactly.
and then each one leads down a particular path.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and that's true. And you can't make somebody want to do what
no,
you're doing. They have to want
no,
to do it themselves.
right.
Yeah. Then and you talk about choice in here too. You say choose to be in the moment, and that's something I've learned through a lot of my guests, and that's hard to do. Can you talk about that being in the moment?
It is, and the thing about that I like is like every morning I take a walk in, kind of a walk in nature is my little thing.
Right.
It's one of those things that kind of forces me to be in the moment. I mean, my mind might be going elsewhere, but I have to watch where I'm going and, and look around. So every time that we aren't in the moment, we're either in the past or in the future, and so that moment passes. So I mean,
Right.
it's one of those things that, if you find yourself, well, for me, when I find myself, thinking about the past or what's going to happen, the day after
Right.
tomorrow,
Right.
it's like, wait a minute, just chill,
Well, I
just
like
look
what you
around.
say in your book. You say, and I'm going to quote you, you say, when you find your attention is drawn to the past or the future, shake yourself back to the present. That had their time in, they had their time and place. And that made a lot of
Right.
sense to me, you know,
Yeah.
um, because you can't live in the past and you can't live in the future. And it's hard because I've been working on this and you really have to be mindful. You really have to pay attention.
Yeah, you can, and I, the one thing that I've noticed is that I find um, a lot more synchronicity, a lot more flow if I'm thinking in the present, or if I'm, present.
Hmm.
So I mean, it's one of those things where if you can catch yourself and get yourself in that moment,
Right.
feel that flow, it's like, okay, that's what I want. And
Right.
then if you find yourself drifting aside, it's like, okay, let me go back. We do it all the time, no matter what.
Right. Well, I've been working on it, and I hope the audience will work on that too. You guys try to live in the moment. You also said something I liked. You said do something different, travel a different route, get out of the bed on the opposite side. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah, we're I mean, so much of our thought is on automatic response, I
Right.
mean, where we go to work, just and habits. And And quite honestly, it's a good thing in many ways because we wouldn't have to want to make every single decision, every single
Hmm.
second. So, I
Right.
mean, that automatic response has a good, good place. But um, the problem is that if you're constantly in that moment, I mean, in that particular path, there's a lot of things that you can miss. In that by doing something different, you're kind of like exercising. Hey, again, I have a choice. I'm going to go ahead and exercise my choice. I'm going to do something different. So
Right.
just by doing that, you're telling your body and your mind that, hey, it's going to be different. Let's do something different.
Right. And when you do something different, you think that kind of changes the energy?
I do, yeah, yes, because I mean it's one of the things that if your system isn't used to what you just chose,
Hmm.
then you're forced to be present. I mean, you have absolutely no choice because your consciousness, your subconscious doesn't know what to expect
You pay more
because it's
attention,
different.
is what
Yes,
you're saying. Okay, all right.
yes.
I like that because I was thinking about that. Well, I have to get on. My husband sleeps on one side and I sleep on the other, but it would be kind of different if I went across on the other side of the bed. I was like, okay, that would be different. And I like that you talk about if you want better life changes, you have to make them. And
Right.
yeah, I think a lot of us are afraid of change. We get stuck in a rut and we have a hard time with change because it's our comfort zone more than anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I
yeah,
want to,
very much.
yeah, and I want to talk about some of that. Listen, we've got about 1 minute to break, but I'd like to talk about some of the guests that you've had on your show when we come
Okay.
back, because some of the stuff that you talked about I found very, very interesting, and I'd like to ask you about it. Hey, you guys,
Sure.
just so you know, yeah. And what's your website? How do people find you? Right off the
It's
bat here, Robert.
yeah, www.biteradio, BITE radio.me.
Okay, and
And
that's
it's got
internet
everything.
radio.
Yep, it's internet and it's on all the other platforms,
You're on
the
iTunes and all that stuff too.
iTunes, Tuna, yeah, Spotify, yeah.
Okay, cool. You guys, we're here today with Robert Sharpe. His book that we are discussing today is It's No Secret, Spirituality Bites. He's the perfect guy to come on my show and talk to me about this kind of stuff today. This is Nancy, you're out, your host, and we'll be right back. Hi, this is Nancy Yearalt, and welcome back to High Road to Humanity. And we are here today with Robert Sharpe. And he's had all these really cool guests. I'll tell you what really hit me more than anything is you said, and I thought this was so interesting, Robert, and I wanted to talk to you about it because I've
Okay.
had some people on my show. I always get wonderful people. I'm so blessed. But then I've had some people that they say they're spiritual, but they're not. And you pick it up.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because you talk about, and I'm kind of skipping ahead a little, but you talk
Okay.
about darkness. And this really hit home with me because, and I'm not going to obviously, bring up any names or anything, but there have been a couple of people on my show where they were supposed to be these really spiritual people. And my intuition, because I'm very intuitive, it just felt like, no, that's not it. Can you talk about this? Because you had an experience, and maybe you'll tell the story of someone on your show and they weren't as light as they said they were. They had ulterior motives.
That story. And it's just one of those facts of our
Mhm.
life, the light, the dark,
I
I mean,
know.
it's just, and you kind of have to have each other in order to know each other. You can't know good without knowing bad, and
I
vice
agree.
versa.
Right.
So, but this particular person was one of those. I know, I'm the like the new prophet kind of, but not not in a, kind of like an astrology, kind of
Hmm.
ancient kind of way.
Right.
Anyway, and had been on my show once or twice, and then been on pretty other widely distributed shows.
Hmm.
And one of the things, and of course, I would constantly get email updates, with the attempt to get back on the show, and I
Hmm.
just I'm the kind that I don't have people back unless there's something new to talk about. I mean,
Right.
if there's, if it's,
If they've got a
and
new
I,
book or whatever.
yeah, a new book. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So anyway, but it got to the point where this person was like getting abusive with, I mean, in sending out stuff, and it was all doom and gloom, and it's like, dude, that is not my thing. I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
my, like you had read that, that I kind of want to bring that positive, uplifting environment, and
Right.
it just wasn't working. So anyway, I had to go through blocking emails and all kinds of stuff to try and stop that communication, which it did, but every now and then it's amazing that things pop up and it's like,
Yeah. Well,
slap that down.
and that's what one thing I learned though, and it was interesting that you had mentioned it in your book. I guess what I'm trying to say more than anything is people can say they're spiritual, but that
Right.
doesn't mean they really are. And
No.
it's like anything else, you can portray yourself to be something, but you usually figure it out in the end. So I just thought that was really interesting. I've had a
Well,
lot of people on my show who've been wonderful. 99% have been fantastic, and they've taught me so much. Um, you say that if you want a better life, that you have to make different choices and you have to change things. Can you talk about that a little bit?
yeah, the idea of making same decisions, being leading to is insane, is insanity. So what you have, if you want things to change,
Right.
for whatever reason, in what area of life, if you want something to change just by nature, then something has to be different. um,
Okay.
you want a different outcome. I mean, you want a different so so basically it's a matter of, um, recognizing that we do have choice in so many different ways, that
Right.
we, so, um, a lot of people feel that they don't have choice. I have to be in this spot because I have no choice,
Hmm.
and in many cases, circumstances sometimes can limit one's choices, but there are always choices, and it's important for me. I think it's important to recognize that you do have that every day, many times
Hmm.
a day, and that in itself, I think, is powerful. I mean, because recognizing that every single decision you make has power. It moves you to a particular way. So,
Hmm.
for people who feel that they have no choice, or is just to recognize that you do and do something different.
Well,
Choose something.
yeah.
Mhm.
And as long as you have integrity and do the right
Right.
thing, and we're not perfect and we all make mistakes, but it's important that we make a good choice, not just for us but for other people. You say let go of people who drain you, honor your time and yourself, and I've had to do that in my lifetime, and
Yeah.
maybe you can talk about that a little bit, because a lot of times people don't want to let go. Could be a family member. I've had family
Yeah.
members that are draining.
Oh, I have stories. No.
Well, you're welcome to
Um,
tell them.
no. Well, I mean, I was, of the type that, like to, not have relationships end. So, sometimes when a relationship comes to a natural ending, I would kind of go like the extra mile and the extra mile. And so, but then it really just came to learn that, really people are in our lives for just a certain set of period of time,
Right.
and they're going to come and go. Some of them are for, a chapter of your life, some of them are for a couple pages or maybe even a paragraph,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
nonetheless, that's the case. And so, to me, it, I came, to recognize the importance of, you know, just recognizing the end of a particular relationship, and that in itself, I mean, it doesn't negate what happened when it happened. I mean, I believe that we have these relationships for reasons,
Right.
but
To teach
but
us
it
something so we
yeah,
learn. Yeah.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
and then it's time to move on. So I mean, and it's always the give and take. So, um I got to the point now where it's like, some people are again are just there for a short time, and that's cool. I mean, I'm happy that that's, if they're there for a long time, that's cool too.
Right. Right.
But I just recognize that I mean, we come in alone and we exit alone, and every
Right. Right.
in between are all those relationships.
Yeah, no, that's true. And you also talk about meditation. I'm big on meditation. Have you always meditated, or did you start this when you started the show, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, no, I didn't always meditate, and I've always had difficulty with the traditional thought that many people have about meditating. You
Me
know that,
too. You're not the only one. Me too.
yeah, your legs crossed, and
I know.
but and then, but anyway, so what I recognized afterwards, after having several people on who talk about meditation, is that if you kind of get away from that stereotype, there are many things that I do that are meditative in nature, like the walking or go on nature shoots,
Yeah.
crocheting, just I mean those kinds of things are
Yeah.
um for some people it's working on cars, whatever. Those particular tasks can really, I think, um help individual get into that particular state, that altered
Right.
state.
Right. You talk about getting out in nature, and I'll bring it since you mentioned it. I wanted to talk about that. I love the little story you tell in your book about the caterpillar, and maybe you'll tell that story for us. But,
Yeah.
my husband and I go camping, and that seems to
Ah,
be my way of getting out in nature, or I'll just go out and sit outside. And I'm one of these people that'll go hold on to a tree to, just ground myself, because a lot
mhm,
of times life gets crazy, and when you get out in nature, it kind of calms you
right.
down. But I love your story. You take a walk every day, like you said earlier, and you were having a tough time. You didn't want to take the walk, and you took the walk. And tell the audience that little story, because I think it's really profound.
Well, it was funny. We know the one thing that, like you said, I do those walks. The one thing that I've learned is that whenever I come across a particular critter, I go back and kind of find out what the meaning is, because I just, the idea of something crossing my path or being right there is one of those moments.
Right. You
So,
got to be aware, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And and I've also learned through examples that the messages are very helpful, that
Hmm.
particular time. So I've learned through experience that it's, not just a waste of time, trying to look up and see what the meaning is. So that particular walk, there, it, and I go up and down this one street, and cars come by, and there's the walk area. But anyway, came across this little caterpillar, and it's not like it was like a hugely different color. I mean, it would stand out, and so I stopped and just kind of thought, wow, this is just wild, because they had actually crossed most of the street. For in a catapult world, it probably would have been like, halfway across the
And
continent,
he's still
you know,
alive. Yeah.
and he was still alive. Yeah, I mean, just the odds of that.
Yeah.
And and like you say, it was one of those particular periods, and what I was doing, some of the things I was doing weren't going in the time frame I wanted. So it was just so frustrating. And and one thing you've learned as you go through and do projects, it's like everything has its own time,
Right.
things unfold. I've
Right.
become less attached to timing, trying to get things done at particular times. And then that one, it was just like, um, that caterpillar had gone that far and had just a little farther way to go, and it would be on green grass for from its point of view, miles,
Wow.
in front of it.
Right.
And
Right.
I decided, maybe this is what I've been doing. Just maybe my struggle, across that asphalt, avoiding all of that stuff, and almost getting to the grass was it. So immediately, I mean, it was just like immediately my whole sense of attachment, my whole sense of angst just shifted, because it was like, that grass is just around the
Yeah, you
corner,
saw
just a little
things
bit more.
differently. You saw
Right.
things differently. I think that's good that you get out in nature, and it really helps people. People don't get out in nature anymore. They sit on their couch, and when you get outside, it really makes a difference. I know that for sure. And I'm very impatient, so I love that story because I'm always like, okay, when's it going to happen? And God's teaching me patience in this life. And it's funny
uh,
because I always know when he's teaching me patience, it put me in the line where I have to be patient. And so
right,
I'm learning as I get older, it gets a little bit easier, but I know
right,
how you feel about that, because you want things to happen. And then, you just never know when it's
right.
going to happen, because it's not in our timing, it's in divine timing.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, I had been working on a book, and a long time now, and over the past like the last 6 to 8 months, it's been kind of I've been getting shifts in what to do, and it's like, oh, and, so anyway, it's getting to the point where the plot is finally unfolding. But it was like I tried to rush it, but then again, I learned that don't
Yeah.
rush it, just chill and see what goes on,
Yeah.
and it worked out that just some key elements just kind of popped in. So.
So it works that way. Hey, listen, we're getting ready to head to another break, but you guys, we're here today with Robert Sharpe. His book, it's called "It's No Secret: Spirituality Bites." It's really cool because he does quotes in here, and he addresses a lot of different subjects that are really, really important. So pick this up. You can get it at Amazon, I'm sure. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
All right. This is Nancy Urel, and we'll be right back. Hi, this is Nancy Yearout. And hey, don't forget to check out my website, nancyyearout.com. I'll tell you what, I'm not doing as many psychic readings anymore. What I'm trying to do now is teach you how to answer your own questions and we're going to talk about that in this segment. I've been to different mediums. I've been to different psychics. I'm psychic myself. But what I've learned more than anything, and Robert, we can talk about this, is that the answers are within you. And if you meditate, you can pick up the answers yourself. And the reason I'm bringing this up is I want to talk about, I know you've had a lot of mediums and psychics on your show. I always feel like, and this is just Nancy's opinion here now, I always feel like a lot of people put their own feeling into the reading instead of just saying the information they get. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, it really does depend on the person. I mean, there are people that I've known in varying degrees of clarity, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
that, some that, feel that, is important to just be objective and clearly just give exactly as they receive, without
Mm-hmm.
any kind of influence at all. And then there are those who sometimes inject, what they feel, you know, in sometimes in some cases it's projecting maybe what they feel this person should. Anyway, again, kind of trying to direct the individual rather than, like you say, allowing the individual to come to their own conclusion, providing just um, um, information.
Well, yeah, because what I realized is everybody puts their own spin on it. And my goal now, I mean, after a year of talking to all these different people, or all years I've done
Hmm.
spirituality work, not just 1 year, but for years I've done it. I think what I've realized more than anything is that we are supposed to connect to the divine ourselves and get those answers because nobody can live your life for you. And nobody can do it for you. You have to do it yourself. And I just feel like when you connect to the divine, you do meditate, you get these messages in your gut or, you feel them.
Hmm.
You just need to go with it and not let somebody else influence your life. I think a lot of these times people are looking for answers outside of themselves and it's really inside. And I see that as an issue. And so I guess my big goal right now, my big push is to teach people how to connect themselves.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that is key.
Yeah.
The idea is that it's good to get information from multiple sources. It's good to get a different perspective, or, a
Right.
different view of
Right.
things.
Right.
Um, ultimately, it boils down to you should be the one making your decision because it's your life.
Right.
And so I get to the point where it's good to, again, it's good to maybe have a medium,
Right.
maybe
Right.
present a perspective, or read a particular book, or or what someone has gone through, or listen to a podcast,
Right.
and see exactly. So again, you get the information, but ultimately you make your own decision.
Yeah, don't let other people make your decisions for you. I love you talk about judgment. Leave your judgment at the door, you say. And gosh,
Yeah.
you say, do not allow someone's criticism of you to affect you negatively in any way. Their judgment is their issue. Boy, isn't that the truth? We're pretty judgy these days, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we do. Yeah, there's a lot of judging, and again, as in most things, it's important to exercise good judgment, and smart decision making to make yourself, keep one safe. But the idea of, trying to influence another's beliefs or feelings is kind of where it's out of bounds. My,
Right.
hmm
Right. I think I've been
and
more
I,
aware of judgments since I've been doing this show. I've been more aware that I was judgy and I don't judge as much.
yeah, I'm the same way, and it's funny
Yeah.
because I've been presented with different topics, and I had one woman on the show. Um, it was years ago, and her name was Winifred. Her first name
Okay.
was Winifred,
Okay.
and I mean, and the topic was someone who had all this experience in metaphysics and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, didn't really get a picture, but I got all the information I needed. So finally, I get the picture, and it's like this young, beautiful California, girl, and it was just like completely. I had prejudged, just
Yeah.
based on a name, that
Right.
this woman was going to be in her 70s or 80s, who names her kid Winifred,
Yeah.
I
That's
guess.
great. That's
But I mean,
great.
to me, I just laughed at myself. I was like, oh boy, was that a good one? Better catch yourself here. So anyway, but
Well, no,
and then
that's
you,
true. That's true.
Mhm.
We're kind of like in this, yeah, where we judge, and it's nice that we're opening up, I think, and talking about it and realizing don't be so
Yeah,
judgy of people until you walk somebody else's path. You have no
right.
idea what they've been through or who they are.
Exactly. And it's just so important to, I think, honor each person's journey, and
Yes.
yeah. And so anyway, and if you do, you honor their journey, they honor yours, then there's just a whole lot of respect going on.
Well, yeah, because we all come down here from what I can figure out here, and I'll tell you what I think about this, and you can tell me what you think. But we all come down here to learn lessons, and we've set this up before we get here. And
I
so
know.
I know,
That
isn't that
blows my
crazy?
mind.
I know, right? So you're in the situation and you're like, why am I in this situation? And I couldn't have planned this
Right,
for myself, really. Honestly,
right,
I went through all this for what? But then you realize as you get older,
right.
I think you start to realize that we are here. We're like in a play and we're just
Exactly.
performing and there's different actors and it's how you respond. It's your reaction to these different things that because you have the choice of how to
Right,
react, and
right.
I think that's the key here is to not take it. I guess I'm to a point now where I think, well, I don't take it that seriously anymore because it's just a play. And in the end, we're all going to go back to where we came from.
Right. And that's the perfect way to describe it, and
Thank you.
the one thing that I often thought, it's just, and when you talk about some people who are living the same kinds of life experiences, but there's like just a different setting,
Right.
for
You mean
me,
they're
I
doing it
thought,
over and over and
yeah,
over? A do over?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and also, well, when you talked about why we're here, my thought is that we're here to learn unconditional love,
Yes.
creation of unconditional love,
Yes.
and that we have certain things kind of set in motion, like a family, where it's supposed to be natural setup for that.
Right.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
But the idea is, it's like, who can who my little spot, my little spark. How can I best create that, and through decisions, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So it's just like in my thought is, it's just like a whole big experiment of seeing who can create the best, easiest unconditional love as possible, and
Right.
what led up to that, so people can
Right.
replicate it. So
Yeah. No, I think that's wonderful. And as you're talking to me and telling me this, I'm thinking about this, and it's how again how we react. And yes, we're supposed to leave this place a better place.
right,
So I think as you get older, you start to think, well, what can I do to influence other people's lives in a more positive way? We've become such a me society, and I think that people need to really look at how can I help other people and how I react to different people, how that influences them, and did I leave a good impression? Did I help them? Did I make their life different? Did I make it better? I think you get to that point.
yeah, I agree, and the as you get older, and if you think of legacy, that kind of thing, the idea is, though, that they every day, like in the Joy Potential book, the main message I had in that one was that every single day you have thousands of chances, opportunities to make someone's day happier.
Right.
and in turn to make your day happier, you
Yeah.
know?
And
So go ahead.
no, I was going to say before I forget about that, and you have two other books. I'm going to have you back. But he has two other books, you guys. One is Joy Potential, Where You'd Least Expect It. And it's a really neat story. I didn't have a chance to read this one, so that's probably why I'll read it and have you come back if you want. And then the
Sure.
other one you did is The Heart and Soul of Caring. And this is
Right.
really cool. I wasn't going to bring this up to the end of the show, but this is about caregivers and how they've handled different relatives and people that are towards the end of life. I mean, what inspired you to write this one, The Heart
Well,
and
that
Soul
one,
of Caring?
yeah,
Yeah,
see, yeah, that one was an odd one. I mean, it was one of those I woke up like probably like 4:30 in the morning and just had that sense that it was a book I needed to do. It was about caregivers and the whole idea, because I've had other people talking about caregiving, being a caregiver and the
right,
challenges with that.
right,
But the one thing that all the things I read that was missing was the focus on the person who needed the care, the
right,
person, the essence of the person. And in many cases with, elderly and Alzheimer's kind of things, that essence is sometimes forgotten. So, the idea was to gather stories from people, that I knew and, even listeners and to just basically tell their story. And my sister wrote hers was the first story in the book of being a
mhm.
caregiver for my mother. So anyway, it was just one of those things. And
I
it
did
got
read
to the
that one, by the way.
oh, did you? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that
um
was sweet. Well, and she was Italian and she was really,
yes.
yeah, if you don't mind me saying, she
Sure.
was,
No.
yeah, she was a tough Italian lady and she found out she had like stage 4 cancer and she just didn't accept it. Is that
Yeah.
pretty much
Yeah,
it? Which I
that's
can
pretty much it.
understand that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and so it was, and it was just one of those things where I just felt that I needed to do, and once I, got it done, it's kind of, again, raised an awareness in me, so I'm very conscious now of different stories that I get that kind of fall into that area and share that
right.
as a resource.
Right. No, I think it's really well. I've had a lot of people. I've had the first one of the first guests I had on my show was Lynn Johnson, and she talked about dying, or Lynn Robinson. I'm
Hmm.
sorry, and she talks about near-death experiences and dying.
Hmm.
And I have had another gentleman on my show where he talks about Oscar the cat, who went to all the patients' rooms in the ward to and sits with them as they're dying, and he knew the cat knows when they're going to die. So I mean,
Hmm.
I've dealt with that too, and it's just, who I really give credit is the caregivers.
Yeah, yeah, it's a challenge. It's a tough thing, and
Yeah,
again, I think it is one of those. In both cases, you remember we talked about, I chose this coming in,
right, right.
and when it gets to that kind of situation, trust me, both sides are thinking, I
I
chose
chose
this.
this. I
Yeah,
know. I know.
yeah.
Hey, we're headed out to another break. We got our last segment coming up. Hey, you guys, I am here today with Robert Sharpe. The book we're talking about, it's No Secret, Spirituality Bites. And this is Nancy Yearout. We will be right back. Hi, this is Nancy Yearout, and we are here, our last segment of the show. We're here with Robert Sharpe. We're talking about all kinds of stuff today. I wanted to talk about one thing you had in your book. It's No Secret, Spirituality Bites. You talk about no expectations, because that's been a tough one for me personally.
Mm.
I always have expectations, and boy, when you have expectations, you get let down. And here's what you say. I wrote this out of this is what you wrote in the book, so I kind of
Okay.
made a note, and it says, detach from particular outcomes to life situations and accept everything that happens as being for your highest good, whether or not it appears so. How did you figure that one out?
Oh, experience. Testing, lots of testing. Like, you get your patience test, comes up,
Yeah, yeah,
that was one of mine too. So, but I mean, that's a hard thing to do. I mean, it really is a hard thing to release, attaching to a particular outcome. And
and why do you think we need to release that outcome? Why can't we expect certain things?
well, it's good to aspire to, but when you move into the expect, that's placing a decided outcome You know, I mean, so within your mind, it's like, this is the outcome that I see. Anything contrary to that is, you know, like should not be considered. So, but nonetheless, is that there might be something happening that, like, for example, maybe you were going in one particular direction and all of a sudden, you know, things kind of come to a standstill, rather than looking at it as having to, you know, overcome that particular one, recognize that maybe there needs to be a particular change, you know. So when you expect, it eliminates by nature alternatives. And, you know, so anyway, I mean, it's kind of like that idea of that quantum approach where, you know, every day in our life we have thousands of, you know, different possibilities, you know,
Right.
and again, what we, you know, what we choose, where we go, you know, is a result of each of those micro choices.
Right. Well, this kind of goes along with the end of the book where you talk about this, like the secret. I love this because you talk about this, you know, manifestation, because it's a this is like a catch 22, because in the manifestation world, we're all little creators, we're all manifesting, right? So if I want to
Right.
manifest a new car, that's what I need to focus on. But then on the flip side, you don't want, you're saying don't focus on it too much because there may be a better car for you. So is that kind of what you're saying there?
Well, not necessarily. I mean,
Okay.
the idea is aspire, you know, to the car, you know,
Okay.
but recognize that, you know, the way that you may go about getting that, or where it may come from, or its particular color, you know, might be a little different. So, I mean, and
So you're
so,
saying expect the car, but don't know exactly what it's going to look like?
well, put out what you would like to see. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and also, like you mentioned about the highest good, you know, that's a particular an important part. I think that's where like the secret kind of fell through
Bingo.
in
Right.
this, yeah, in the sense
You want
that,
to
you
know
know,
where I think the secret fell through?
where's that?
Well, because you can I've learned this over time, so I'm going to share it with you in the audience. You know, over time, I'm a real estate broker as well. And that's what
Mhm.
and I'm still a licensed real estate broker. And I was a single mom for many years. So I would manifest sale. I would drive in my car and say, I sell houses like crazy. And money comes to me immediately and constantly, and I accept the abundance. And I would say all these affirmations. And guess what? I was rookie of the year. I was a very successful real estate agent because I learned how to draw things to myself.
Right.
Okay. But then on the flip side of that, um, you do need to be open. Yes, you need to draw things to yourself, but here's what they don't talk about in The Secret. You have to feel it.
Mhm.
You got to know what it feels like. You can say it and you can think about it and you can write it down, but until you feel it in your gut, it's not the
Right.
same. So I've learned, this is Nancy's philosophy and I believe it's proper, is that when you can feel it, then that's the key. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, everything comes out of emotions. I mean,
Yes. The
everything
energy of
that's
it.
the drive. Yeah, the energy of it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where that creative spark moves from, you know, something nebulous to something tangible.
Right.
Yeah.
And you
So,
say you say there's
mhm,
no coincidences. I like this too because I believe in synchronicity, and the
right.
universe is always trying to get our attention. And you know, when I read that, I do a chapter in my book on numbers, and I wanted to ask you this: do you pay attention to the numbers because it's the universe, you know, showing us different things? Do you do
Yeah,
that?
I do. Yeah, I
Ah, I
do
love it.
numbers. Yeah, you know, and then of course, you know, cloud. I mean, clouds. I mean, just all different kinds of things. You know that, and no, well, actually, I'll tell you the story real quick. This
No,
was
we got time.
before the 11/11 thing happened.
Right, right, right.
It was when I was in transition from corporate world to entrepreneurship.
Hmm.
So during that particular period, I was like lost. I mean, because I was so corporate, you know,
Right,
that it was
right.
just like, you know, with that shift, it was like, oh my God, what do I do?
I know.
So anyway, it was truly driving me crazy. But at the same time, I would wake up at 3:11. I mean, the 11s just came, you know, everywhere. I mean,
Right.
I was in constant awareness of the 11 to the point where it was like I thought I was going crazy. It was like, you know,
Why do
this,
I
I
keep
mean,
seeing
yeah,
11s?
exactly. Why do I keep, and that no other number, you know? So, finally, it was like after a little bit of introspection, I realized that um, what was happening as I started paying attention to what was happening at that 11-minute mark. I realized that everything that I was doing at that point was a facet of what my new reality is.
You were in sync.
That it was showing me the idea of I don't know who I am or what I do. Um, was just non-existent. It was that every single moment, every single 11 minute, it was reminding me this is part of who you are now.
Right.
So the idea of, I don't know who I am was like suddenly gone. It was like, okay, I'm all of this, I'm doing laundry, I'm cooking, I'm writing, I'm doing radio. So, I mean, whatever, I'm all a facet of
Well,
what was going
yeah,
on.
learn to experience joy in everything you do, and that's something I've kind of realized too. Having different people on and starting to pay attention and being aware, like you talk about, is that God put us in these bodies, and we're so fortunate, and He wants us to enjoy our everyday life, what we're doing, enjoy it. Bring the joy to it. Now, for the audience, explain to them what the 11:11 means. I think you have somewhat, but I've seen it. What do you feel the meaning is of the 11?
Well, I mean, according to numerology, it's a master number
Right.
in the sense that it's just one of those numbers to pay attention to. I think that it's one of the, as far as like a zeitgeist, an overarching energy that it really, because a lot of people in other countries are experiencing. I mean, it's one of those things that's experienced globally.
Worldwide, yeah.
So that, my thought is that purpose is for everyone to recognize, that interconnectedness, that it's something that's going on all the time. So I just look at it, whenever I look at that, it's like, I just examine what I'm doing. It's like, okay, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing,
Right. You're on the right path.
and that's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Well, and that makes a whole lot of sense. And that's the same thing happened to me. I used to see one number all the time, and then it switched to 11:11. And it was like, yeah. And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, so I'm to a different point because I'm seeing a different number now. And that was quite
Right.
interesting. So I get that. You talk about fear, and I guess we've only got a few more minutes left of the show, but I want to talk about fear and love, because that's really what it boils down to. You're either afraid or you're not. You're in love or you're in fear. And I think that's where we're at in our society right now. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I mean, that's the duality again, like light and dark. I mean, it's, love and fear. You recognize each one, it's a recognizable feeling with each one. And I think that it's one of those cases where we're seeing such a expanded sense of fear that, the counter action of love is one of those things that is kind of has to grow in conjunction with the fear. So I mean, I believe all of this stuff, even the chaos that we're experiencing, is just to raise awareness, just to be
Mm-hmm.
recognized. That
Right.
yes, it's good to be good to people. Yes, you treat people yes, you treat people with respect.
Right.
And I
Right.
mean, there are just some just common sense,
Hey,
goodness.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
We could just get back to manners
Sure.
and
Okay.
humility and
Mhm.
kindness.
Yeah.
And I just don't see the kindness. I really
Right.
talk a lot about that, just to be kind to each other. And I will say one thing about the fear. The more, I don't know if you want to call it spiritual, the more connected I am to the divine, to God, I am less afraid. Do you feel that way too?
Yes, I think, well, because there's a trust, and the trust
Right.
in that,
In the whole work and the whole deal.
yeah, the
Yeah.
whole deal. Right,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like, okay, I'm here for the, for the play. I'll be in, all three acts if you want me to. That's fine. But yeah, you just don't have that attachment, and if you don't, fear a particular outcome, or fear that anything bad is going to happen, that it's really all for your good, then that just it can't exist. If
Right. It
you're
kind of
in that
erases
period.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. Well, listen, we've got about 1 minute before we're heading out, but I want to thank you for coming, and I want you to give out your website. And you guys, we're going to have Robert back if he wants to, so we can talk about his other books. But the one book we have is called "It's No Secret: Spirituality Bites." It's a really good read, you guys, and it's really enlightening. It's a, you give such great insight. I will say that.
Thank you. And little things to do, for little
Yeah.
things for people to do. That to me that was important because once you learn something, you can't have anything different unless you do something different. So
Right. And at the end of each chapter, you guys, he has like an action. And that's what he's talking about. And so, he kind of, sums up the chapter and gives you an action to do, something that you can do to change your life, to make it better. And I just think it's great that you're doing this show. And do you have another book in the works, you say?
yes, it's actually
Tell me.
it's kind of like a science fiction, and I love science fiction. So,
Okay.
but it's a science fiction, but with a touch of that metaphysical side in there, and I've had it on the back burner for gosh, probably 3 or 4 years. I mean, it's just one
Okay.
of those things that's been there. It's just been sitting, and it wasn't until recently that I got a couple major shifts. I mean, it's like you have to have that good and the bad. I
Right.
mean, it's just so coming up with the appropriate. Actually, coming up with the bad guy was was easy. I mean, that was part of the. Um, but coming up with that counterpoint just kind of fell into place. So anyway, there's certain things that are now happening that it's like, oh, that's perfect. So it
Right.
involves time travel and
Oh, nice. Because I
and
like time travel. Yeah.
Akashic records and all kinds of things. So,
Cool. So when is it coming out? When do you think you'll be
oh,
done?
I don't know. I'm actually active now. I mean, I'm right back in the
Okay.
point where I can sit down there and
Okay.
tap away and
Okay.
get into it. And, it takes a little work for me to get in that bad
But
side,
you'll get,
to create
but
to
you'll get
create
it.
conflict.
That's awesome.
But
Well, listen, we're out of time, but it's
thank you.
fantastic. And I'm so glad you came on the show. And thanks for teaching us this stuff. And thanks for being on the radio and helping people. I think it's a wonderful thing that you do.
Well, thank you. You as well. Wonderful work. I'm really looking forward to following and watching your shows as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Hey,
Thank
you
you.
guys, this is Nancy Yearout, and join us next week on High Road to Humanity, and we'll see you later. Take care. Bye.